Welcome into Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara joined as always by Rob Moseley, editor-in-chief of GoDucks.com. We are here to wrap up Oregon's defeat. 33-10 was the final score against number 11 Washington State last night as we filmed this at Autzen Stadium. A disappointing loss, obviously, for Oregon. They fall to 4-2 on the season, 1-2 in the Pac-12, and I think that's where it hurts the most.
Yeah, the debut of Braxton Burmeister as a starting quarterback after he was pressed into duty just a week before, so he goes within a period of about 10 days from thinking he's going to redshirt to starting a game against the number 11 team in the country and a Washington State team that's playing really good defense so far this season. They were able to load up against the run. Ducks couldn't do a whole lot offensively outside of some good field position in the first half, and then defensively I felt like the Ducks really held strong for most of the game. Just a couple of explosion plays, which have really been the only real issue for this defense. A couple of explosion plays at Arizona State and then a couple last night against Washington State have really hurt them. But overall, commendable effort on that side of the ball. But it's going to be an interesting couple weeks now as Justin Herbert rehabs from his shoulder injury and the Ducks try to find some answers at quarterback.
Ducks got off to a kind of an ominous start with back-to-back false start penalties to start the game on offense. It was really a communication issue where the quarterback wasn't being loud enough. I saw a lot of people blaming the offensive line. Willie Taggart kind of clarified that in the postgame that the quarterback and the line were not on the same page, and blame can be spread around on something like that. But Oregon does score 10 points in the first quarter. They, like you mentioned, some short field helped that, but a great designed play. The touchdown to Jacob Breland had Royce Freeman line up wide, goes in motion. I mean, everything on that play just was, it was like watching a symphony. I mean, it was perfectly in sync. Even Burmeister, his body language, the way he dropped back, the way he released the ball, and you're like, hey, we might be on to something here. Right. And for whatever reason, that was the highlight in this one. Aiden Schneider was able to add a field goal in the first quarter. The Ducks had a brief lead in this one. And I think that was as good of a start as you could have expected, really, for a true freshman quarterback. Put 10 points up in the first quarter, you're on pace for 40. Unfortunately, the Ducks weren't able to get anything going, particularly on third and fourth down in this game. After third down, Oregon was 2 of 20 for the game, 2 of 17 on third down, and 0 of 3 on fourth down, and some fourth and shorts really surprising.
Yeah, and one of the 2 third down conversions was on the final drive of the game, was the last third down attempt of the game. So to that point, 1 of 16 on third down. It did come on one of the scoring drives, so it helped extend the drive. I think Burmeister ran for a first down to help maybe set up the field goal. And yeah, the touch pass to Breland was fantastic. And at that moment, yeah, there's just really hopeful that, hey, maybe on a day of upsets around college football, when we saw Michigan State beat Michigan and Iowa State take out Oklahoma, maybe there was a chance for one to go down at Autzen Stadium. But that was about it. And that pass suited Braxton. There was nobody over the top. It was a chance for him to really put air under the ball and get it to his guy over the top. Which is, he's a freshman. He doesn't quite get behind the ball quite as much and throw with the kind of velocity that Justin Herbert does. So, when he goes deep, it tends to have some air under it. So when his guy's open like that, it's a good shot. But when guys are covered, the Ducks miss the accuracy of a Justin Herbert. And by the same token, Burmeister, there was some stuff rolling out on the run that I thought really suited him. But some times when he had to drop back and read the field when he got overwhelmed by the pass rush trying to pick through his decisions or just didn't see some people. I mean, again, the very last drive of the game, Darian Felix is running wide open down the seam for what would have been a really similar route to the Breland play and maybe another touchdown to finish on a high note there, but just didn't see him. So just so much to learn, so much for Braxton Burmeister to watch on film, digest, bounce back from, and try to improve moving forward.
Well, physically, he's a different quarterback, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. He's got some great athleticism. Yeah. A few of the runs where he kind of made something out of absolutely nothing, right. Being able to spin off tackles and get loose a little bit. So that was really encouraging. But he doesn't have the arm strength of a player like Justin Herbert, and then mentally, there's no way that he can possibly grasp all of the aspects of the playbook at this point. And I think that's where losing Taylor Alley, having him unavailable in this game, Coach Taggart found out on Friday he would not have him. Right. Not to say that Taylor would have started over Braxton. I think Braxton was going to start all along. But I think you would have seen both quarterbacks play yesterday. And Alley, similar skill set to Burmeister physically, but nobody probably knows the offensive playbook better than Taylor Alley on this football team.
Yeah, it's a tough hypothetical to try to pick through what might have happened, how last week might have gone in practice, how the game might have gone. He was cleared to start working his way back, and so was able to do some things in practice and take some reps. Doesn't take away from the fact Braxton had, again, we talked about on the Quack Minute, an amazing practice Tuesday. Where he really elevated, I think, his standing in everybody's minds about what he could be as leader of this team. And yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe at that point, boom, the starting job is his regardless. But Taylor was still had a chance over the Tuesday, Wednesday to do some things, to try to show where he was at and what he could get done. But then just didn't, by the end of the week, wasn't cleared. So it was down to the Braxton Burmeister show, and just a tough spot for a kid to be in. I mean, a year ago the Ducks go to Herbert. In part out of necessity, but in part because he was ready. I mean, if watching him in practice, it was like, hey, this is a guy that could help this team. Maybe it's just time to make that change. It was just different circumstances this time. I don't think anybody wanted to see Braxton Burmeister get thrust into that or felt like he was completely ready to take that on, but it was thrust upon him. It was a commendable effort by him to keep his head up, keep going out there, keep trying to lead this offense, keep trying to get some drives sustained. But ultimately, that was the issue. Just couldn't sustain drives down the field, partly because of some penalties, like at Arizona State, backing yourselves up before you can get going and get in some third and long situations. But partly just out of inexperience and stuff he'll grow from.
Yeah, true freshman, and very different from Herbert's situation. After 2 weeks in August last year, it was obvious that Herbert was not going to redshirt on this team. In a perfect scenario, Burmeister probably does redshirt for the 2017 Ducks, and it just didn't play out that way. One of Willie Taggart's sayings is "make no excuses." So I'll make some excuses for the football team. Charles Nelson missing a third straight game, and despite missing half the season now for Oregon, Charles Nelson is still the leading receiver in terms of yards on this team. So not having him available as an option for a young quarterback is, that's an excuse, but.
And Dylan Mitchell not in pads.
Yeah, Dylan Mitchell. So your top two receivers in terms of receptions on the season are out of action. Royce Freeman left the game a week ago, comes back, looked good, but they could just never get into any sort of rhythm in the running game in this one. And so you've got a true freshman quarterback, and you've got some quality but very inexperienced receivers out there to try to get your passing game going.
Yeah, and that a play like that, an early throw on third down to Malik Lovett that's a little high. Lovett's able to get a hand on. Maybe you say, hey, he should have caught that. The ball was a little high. It's just that's the sort of play where things are just a little off. Just the rhythm's not there, the timing's not there. Both guys probably put it on themselves why that play didn't work, but it just sort of encapsulates how just things were never clicking. And again, it took away from such a solid defensive effort. I mean, that defense, again, the explosion play to start the game, but then 3 and outs to set up punts that were poor punts and then help the offense get some points on the board. I mean, I don't feel like you could ask the defense to do a whole lot much more than they did in that game.
Washington State scores 33 in this one, 10 of those directly off of turnovers, and 17 if you consider turning the ball over on downs as a turnover. So, yeah, to your point on the defense, I think that they gave up a couple plays they'd love to have back. Troy Dye mentioned it in the postgame press conference that they need to tackle better, and that let them down on a couple of the big Washington State plays. But when you look at the numbers, this is a Washington State team with Luke Falk at quarterback, coached by Mike Leach, and if I told you that the Ducks would hold them to under 300 yards passing, I mean, Washington State a couple years ago passed for like 1,000 yards in a single, that's an exaggeration, but well over 500 yards in a single game. They hold Falk to 282, overall 369 yards of offense. I mean, those are, when you see those numbers and you have a normal Oregon offense in terms of players being available, that's a win.
Yeah, and some of the stops they made, making them settle for field goals instead of touchdowns, those are the types of plays, stands they took where had Oregon's offense been clicking on all cylinders, those are decisive points that are kept off the board. What they kick, 3-4 field goals. So you're talking about another 12, 16 points they could have put on the board if those are touchdowns. And yeah, you give up 45, 49 points. You're going to have a hard time beating anybody. But you keep Washington State to 33 points on normal Oregon offense. I think with Herbert at quarterback, frankly, you feel like, hey, there's definitely a chance to outscore them and win that game. So a tough one to swallow. And again, we're making the excuses here because that's reality. I mean, it was just a tough spot for the Ducks to be in, for the new quarterback to be in, and given the opponent, given the situation, and all in all, I thought everybody fought valiantly. I mean, they played hard. Post game, offensive line is saying the game's all on them. The defense is saying the game's all on them. So nobody's quitting, nobody's pointing fingers. We're not hearing something the grousing. It was around this time last year when you started to hear some grumbling and guys pointing fingers and saying they weren't all on the same page. You're just not seeing any of that. They're staying united behind Willie Taggart and keeping fighting, and they're going to have to because it is a daunting stretch of the schedule coming up again over the next 3-4 weeks.
We should a tip of the cap to the field goal kicker for Washington State, Powell. He hits a 52-yarder, and then he hits a 47-yarder into the wind. So not only was Oregon holding them to field goals, but those were two instances where you just, hey, if you can make that,
right,
have at it. I mean, those were impressive kicks, and something that I think typically, if you're the defense and you can say, okay, we just stopped them on third down, and they're at the 40 or just inside the 40-yard line, that typically is a win. Yeah. So some good individual performances. They got to Falk early defensively. 4 different players with sacks in this one. Jordan Scott gets another sack for the big true freshman. Really he was impressive last night. Jalen Jelks, Jelks really, to me, with the game, with the outcome decided late in the second half, he is still playing every snap like it's the first snap of the game.
Yeah, he's knocking down balls at the line like he was, a week before with a couple pass breakups. I think he's top 25 in the country in sacks and for tackles for loss. Somebody asked him about his philosophy on when he's rushing the passer on third down, and he said those are money downs. And he is probably making himself a little bit of money right now. I mean, I think if you're a pro scout and you see what Jalen Jelks is doing right now, you're pretty impressive. But props to Joe Salavea, props to Coach Levitt, the new defensive coordinator, because what those guys are doing, that 4-man line, particularly in the nickel package of Moy and Hollins and Mondu and Jelks, who had to play a lot again against the Cougars, against their passing offense, just their ability to get pressure. We saw Troy Dye blitz once. We saw him bring a 4th or a 5th guy a couple times. So it was mostly a base 3- and 4-man pass rush that was really collapsing the pocket and getting to Falk. So just again, just a sign that guys are playing hard. The defense certainly was victimized by some pass interference penalties where, all of us are looking at them going, oh, okay, didn't necessarily see it there, but the flag was thrown, so you got to play through it. But just hard to find too much fault with the job they did.
You mentioned Troy Dye leads the team with 11 tackles in this one and had maybe what will end up being the defensive highlight of the year for an individual effort where he's lying on his back and has the presence of mind to look up and strip the ball away, get the ball back for the offense for Oregon. It was
kid just never stops.
No, not at all. And it's a perfect example if you're a coach. When you're trying to coach guys up, to tell them to play with maximum effort and be engaged at all times. I mean, he could have very easily just been he's on his back at that point. The play is over for him essentially, or you would assume, but never stop fighting in that instance.
Yeah, big week coming up now. Hopefully, Ducks will get a couple guys back, get a couple guys healthy, go to Stanford. Bryce Love is as explosive a player as there is in college football right now, but the Ducks are stopping the run generally. They're getting off the field on third down, so it's really going to be a good matchup that way. But again, getting some, hopefully get a couple more guys back healthy and just keep plugging along because they're in the spot they're in. Quarterback wise, again, maybe hopefully Taylor Alley's one of those guys coming back, and then they can start to build some things and kind of expand. Burmeister can build off his experience. You get a Taylor Alley, take advantage of what his experience provides, and try to put together a package that can be even more competitive going down to Stanford next week.
The Ducks need to still clean up the penalties a little bit, and if you look at the 2 losses in both instances, third down on offense was really miserable, and in the victories it was the opposite. So if they can fix some things, at least in those third down situations, give themselves a chance against Stanford. And this is not a knock against Stanford, but it's not the most rabid crowd, if you will, down at Stanford Stadium. So it's it might be a good thing too to just sort of get away, get out on the road, and really focus on the task at hand. That'll be Saturday night down at Stanford Stadium. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff Pacific time. So for those of you watching us on the East Coast, take a nap during the day, or whatever you do, coffee, Red Bull, whatever you need to do. It's going to be a late night for you as the Ducks face the Cardinal down at Stanford on Saturday. Until next time, if you have any questions, comments for Rob and I, you can get to us on Twitter. I am at McNamara UO. He is at Duck Football. We'll see you.